What's up, you guys? Sam here with a new video today, and we're here to bring you guys the next episode of why this card was banned, and we are here to talk about none other than dun 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 Heavy Storm. That's right, you guys. Probably one of the most recognized cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, one of the most notorious cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, and without a doubt, one of the most powerful cards in Yu-Gi-Oh. This card has actually been on and off of the ban list multiple times. For those of you that don't know, when the ban list first came out in like 2004, and so on and so forth, this card has gone on and off of the ban list. It has never been at more than one. And the card has seen some of the craziest formats. It has been the most ridiculous card in some of those formats. And we're going to talk about why this card was banned, because Heavy Storm is a card that to this day players are still wishing it was back at 1. Well, maybe 50% of the community are asking for it to be back at 1, while the other 50% are not on your life. Can this card ever come back? So we're going to start off like we do in this series with the first thing we ever do, and this is read the card, get the general, idea of the card. All I'm going to say before that, if you guys can just smash that like button, 50 plus likes for the next episode of this series would be awesome. That's all I'm asking for you guys. I just really want these series to do well. 50 likes is all it takes. So we're going to start with Heavy Storm. It is a normal spell card. It actually was originally released in Metal Raiders, I believe, as a super rare. This is a Hobby League version for those of you that don't know. And it simply reads, destroy all spells and trap cards on the field. That's it. It's a very simple effect. It just wipes the back row clean, and that includes your own. Now people are thinking, why on earth is this card, banned? Why is this card so broken? I mean, just think about it for a minute. This card is literally like a reset button for the back row. Not only your opponent's back row, but your back row. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Slim, why on earth would I want to destroy my own back row? Well, to be honest, that wasn't really the way this card was used. If you had to sacrifice some of your back row in the process, you did it. But other than that, you're mostly using this against your opponent. And this card has actually coined a phrase that a lot of old players will remember, a lot of OGs will remember, but a lot of new players probably won't. And it was called the Pro Heavy. Now, the Pro Heavy was a play that it was very risky, but if you resolved it, it was nuts. So basically what you would do is you would actually set your copy of Heavy Storm. I know, it's crazy, you guys. Your opponent would feel safe, set a couple back row. On the start of your turn, you would flip this card up, wipe out their board, wipe out their back row, and basically just sway the game in your favor because of how much plus you got off of Pro Heavy. It's kind of insane when you think about it. It was a play that some of the really just old school players basically kind of coined. They used it in multiple matches and it worked really well. But of course, as time went on, this was a play you couldn't safely do because, I mean, players got smarter and, risking back row like that was just crazy. But one thing I'll say about Heavy Storm is why this card was banned was because wiping out that many back row in one swift blow is crazy. It's not like cards like Hey Trunade that just blow away face up back row. It covers everything, including your own. And of course, when the time comes, we will do an episode on Giant Trunade. That is actually one of my favorite spell cards in the game that's actually banned. But as far as Heavy Storm goes, is it didn't bounce the cards back to your opponent's hand. When they were destroyed, they were destroyed. Now, the thing is that what was so powerful about this is that it could just sway the tide of a game in 2 seconds. I'll never forget YCS San Diego, the finals. My friend Angel Asensio was playing Mermails against a guy that was playing Fire Fist. I believe in Game 3, the guy sets 4 or 5 back row. Angel just activates Heavy Storm. The opponent has no response, has no Starlight Road, etc. And his whole back row is wiped, and Angel is free to just make his plays. Heavy Storm won him that YCS. Heavy Storm won him that YCS right then and there. And I think it's crazy that a card could literally decide a YCS with its simple activation. But that's how powerful Heavy Storm is. And that's why a lot of these banned cards you guys will see is by their sheer design, by their sheer activation, they deserve to be banned. Now, another thing about Heavy Storm is that this card made people fear. They put a lot of players in fear to set back row. It's like, think about it. If you're running a trap-based deck, what's the most valuable cards in your deck? It's the trap cards. They're your protection. They're the way that you combat the opponent. But when your opponent is playing a card like Heavy Storm, you never know at what point they're going to have it. This card is not searchable. That's one thing that you guys should know. This card is not searchable. You're not going to know when your opponent has it unless you're playing cards like Mind Crush or something that'll give you detailed information that your opponent has it. If they played like a Pot of Duality and added it to hand, you're not going to know if your opponent has Heavy Storm. You're going to have to take that risk. And the way that a lot of smart players play is they don't don't want to set more than 1 or 2 back row at a time. Now people will wonder, is it worth heavy storming 1 or 2 cards? Well, we'll get into that. But one thing is that this card put a lot of fear in players to where they didn't want to set as many back row. They wanted to play more conservatively, and a lot of times that could make or break the game. If you play too conservatively, your opponent can just overpower you. If you don't play conservatively enough, you can be punished for overextending. So heavy storm by itself could dictate a lot of things. Now, like my previous question I just mentioned, is it worth it to heavy storm 1 or 2 cards? 2 cards, yes, you're getting a plus. You're activating heavy storm, you're knocking out 2 cards with 1 card, you're getting a small plus. Now, is it worth it to go 1 for 1 with heavy storm? A lot of times you didn't want to do it. Cards like Mystical Space Typhoon were around for that sheer reason, but there were a couple situations that you'd actually want a heavy storm for 1, and that was mainly when you were pushing for game, or you were reestablishing your board or your control of the board to where you knew no matter what your opponent drew, you were going to win. Sometimes you would heavy storm for 1. Sometimes that heavy storm could 1 for 1 could be the be all end all. Like literally you could heavy storm for 1. It could be a Solemn Judgment. It could be a Solemn Warning, etc., and you could just win the game because of that. Now, another thing is with Heavy Storm, people were hesitant to play Solemn Judgment. Think about it. You have a Solemn Judgment set. You have another back row set. At that point, you have to decide how valuable is this back row? Is it worth half my life points? And that's another thing Heavy Storm did brilliantly. It really put players on tilt. It really made them think before they activated their cards in response to Heavy Storm, and because of that, I feel this card really did earn its spot on the ban list. Now, another thing is when Starlight Road came out, a lot of people kind of breathed a sigh of relief. In their heads, they were like, okay, I have an out to Heavy Storm. Not only that, of course, Stardust Dragon could be its own out by itself, but the fact that you could just activate Starlight Road, you could set 4 back rows, set your 5th back row with Starlight Road, your opponent goes Heavy Storm, you flip Starlight Road, the Heavy Storm is gone, and you get a free Stardust. It was insane. But before that card was even released, Heavy Storm was an absolute behemoth of a card because it could just punish bad players. And I think that's the thing that this card did amazingly, is that it punished bad players so that if they overcommitted their back row, they were punished by Heavy Storm. And I think that's what was crazy. I think the fact that cards like this could basically, like I said earlier, could dictate formats, could dictate the way a player plays is insane. And I think that alone is what can get a card on the ban list, is when it's basically playing the game for the opponent. Now, you guys need to really think about what I just said there. This card was playing your opponent's turn. When you had possession of this card, whether your opponent knew it or not, they had to make a mental decision. Do I set back row? Do I not set back row? Do I set 1 or 2 back row? Do I set all my back row and kind of YOLO it? And that's what was crazy about this card. It basically dictated all of that. Another thing about this card, it could be completely unfair and completely one-sided. When you were in control of Heavy Storm, you were basically in control of the game, because once the back row was gone, your monsters were free to do what they want. Back in the day, there weren't that many hand traps. Cards like Maxi and cards like a Fegler were around, but they weren't enough to win you games. You could Maxi your opponent. If they knew they were going to win the game, they would just push through everything. If they had outs to Gores and Tragodia, they were still going to push through everything, and that's why I think Heavy Storm back then was just insane. It was like once this was activated and once it resolved successfully, the game changed completely. The whole like board and everything changed because the back row was gone. You were free to do whatever you want, and if you could combat your opponent's hand traps, then you were going to win. And I think that's what was crazy. One last thing I'm going to say about Heavy Storm is, could it come back? It's interesting. And I say that's interesting because so many players want this card back. They think that if this card is back, like it has in previous formats, it will put back row decks in check. But when we think about it, how many back row decks do we really have? What's considered a real back row deck? Basically Altergeist. If you look at any other back row decks, they don't really exist. You could kind of say True Draco, but not really. If you Heavy Storm True Draco, a lot of times all their stuff will activate because their traps activate. So that's not really a thing. But Altergeist is one of your only back row decks, maybe Border Stun, etc. But outside of that, you're not going to see that many back row decks. Now, if Heavy Storm came back, would it make an impact in the format? Yes, it would. People would definitely be playing Heavy Storm pretty much every deck they could because this card is just basically an auto win button. It's also pretty good against Sky Strikers because they use multi-roll. After they use multi-roll, you just heavy them. They're not using traps basically in their deck, so you just Heavy Storm all the spells away. They're all banished. I mean, that's just like a blowout, but I personally don't think this card can come back. I think that it's just so good and so powerful. I don't think it would be healthy if this card came back. Now, people will argue with me and say, Slim, of course it's healthy because then people won't set as many back row. But again, I ask you, how many decks really set that much back row? When you think about Goki, They don't. When you think about Sky Striker Trickstar, they really don't. Their only real traps are like Reincarnation, maybe Impermanence. When you think of pure Sky Strikers, they're only setting cards if it's off of multi-roll. And if Heavy Storm was around, you just blow them out of the water because they're banished because they were set off multi-roll. And another thing is you just blow them out the water anyway because you already know what the cards are. And then you look at the rest of the decks. The only deck that really sets a lot of back row is Anti-Meta Stun and Altergeist. So because of that, I personally don't think this card can come back. But it's crazy when you think about it. This card single-handedly dictated formats, and up until its banning in 2013, it had been banned multiple times before, but until its final banning in 2013, this card ran rampant. But anyways, that's all I have to say, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, be sure to show your support. 50 plus likes is all I'm asking on this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know the next episode you'd like to see. I'd like to know your personal stories with Heavy Storm. Also, what card you'd like me to talk about next here on why this card was banned. And yeah, Heavy Storm, you were a behemoth of a card. You destroyed so many back rows, so many endless back rows. You swayed so many tides of games, changed so many game states, and won so many games. You, my friend, need to stay in the band binder. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys want to see on the next episode. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.